the magic and demonology of Babylonia and Assyria. Like other primitive races, the peoples of Chaldea scarcely discriminated between religion and magic. One difference between the priest and the sorcerer was that one employed magic for religious purposes, while the other used it for his own ends. It's worth noting here that the Eshipu, the sorcerer, was merely one of the titles for the priesthood. The Shangu Makkhu, the Eshipu, the Mushelu, and the Mashmashu, who were all part of the priesthood. And the original meaning for priest is a mallet used to kill fish when caught angling. They are the human gatekeepers, the barrier between the human and the divine. The literature of Chaldea, especially its religious literature, teems with references to magic, and in its spells and incantations we see the prototypes of those employed by the magicians of medieval Europe. Indeed, so closely do some of the Assyrian incantations and magical practices resemble those of European sorcerers of the Middle Ages and of primitive peoples of the present day, that it is difficult to convince one's self that they are of independent origin. In Chaldea, as in ancient Egypt, the crude and vague magical practices of primeval times received form, reformation, and developed into accepted ritual, just as early religious ideas evolved into dogma under the stress of theological controversy and opinion. The controversy caused by the Reformation, as there were men who would dispute upon religious questions, and so there were persons who would dispute magical matters. This is not to say that the terms religion and magic possessed any well-defined boundaries, nor is it at all clear, as they do for us in the 20th century. They overlap. The magical Kuduru standing stone is a perfect example. They overlap. And it has long been the belief of the writer that their relations are represented by two circles which intersect one another, and the areas of which partially coincide. The Kuduru stone was placed beyond the borders of Assyria to poison the land, meaning tempt people into its worship, making the region easier to assimilate. They overlap. From Babylonia to Assyria, from Assyria to Egypt, from Egypt to Greece, to Rome, to Germania, to France, and then Britain. The writer has outlined his opinions, the writer being A.H. Sayers, the professor and priest who was the head of Oxford University, and whether he likes it or not, he is my unofficial mentor. I have found that nobody's work comes close to Sayers. In fact, he is the main source on this subject. So why was he cancelled? Because he was the main source on this subject. The writer has outlined his opinions regarding the origin of magic, and has little to add to what he then wrote, except that he desires to lay stress upon the identification of early religion and magic. It is only when they begin to evolve, to branch out, that the two systems present differences. If there is any one circumstance which points out the difference more than another, is that the ethical element does not enter into magic, as it does into religion. That Chaldean magic was the precursor of European medieval magic, Enochian, the language of the angels, as part from popular sorcery and witchcraft, is indicated not only by the similarity between the systems, but by the introduction into medieval magic of the names of Babylonian and Assyrian gods and their magicians, the Shangu Makkhu. Again and again is Babylon appealed to, even more frequently than Egypt, and we meet constantly with the names of Beelzebub, Ishtar, Azashtarte, Baal, and Moloch. They are the names of demons, obviously of Babylonian origin, and they are encountered in almost every work on the subject. Frequent allusions are also made to the wise men and the necromancers of Babylon, and to the stargazers of Chaldea. Sin, Zu, wisdom. The conclusion is irresistible that ceremonial magic, as practiced in the Middle Ages, owed much to that of Babylon. Our information regarding Chaldean magic is much more complete than that which we possess concerning the magic of ancient Egypt. Hundreds of spells, incantations, and omen inscriptions have been recovered, and these not only enlighten us regarding the class of priests who practiced magic, they inform us of the several varieties of demons, ghosts, and evil spirits. They minutely describe the Babylonian witch and wizard, and they picture for us many magical ceremonies, besides informing us of the names of scores of plants and flowers possessing magical properties, of magical substances, jewels, amulets, and the like. Also they speak of ordering, or the divination of the future, the drawing of magical circles, of the exorcism of evil spirits, and the casting out of demons. See the Pitpi Ritual and the Makkhu tablet, where you will learn that the priesthood are openly invoking the king of Legion, Pazuzu. In these Babylonian magical records, we have by far the most complete picture of the magic used in the ancient world. It is a wondrous story that is told by those bricks and cylinders of stamped clay, the story of civilized man's first gropings for light, for in these venerable writings we must recognize the first attempts at scientific elucidation of the forces by which man is surrounded. Science, like religion, has its root deep in magic. The primitive man believes implicitly in the efficacy of magic ritual, what it can bring about, once it can bring about again, if the proper conditions be present and recognized. Here Mr. Spence must be speaking on invocational magic. Thus it possessed, for the barbarian, as much as the element of certainty, as the scientific process does for the chemist or the electrician. Given certain causes, certain effects must follow. Surely then, in the barbarous mind, magic is pseudo-scientific of the nature of science, like the eye of Sauron, a more ominous spirit of the ancient and the obscure in the magic of old Mesopotamia than in that of any other land. And that's why I've spent so much time here. I've learned all I can relating to the obscure. I was blind, but now I see there are no strings on me. Its mighty sanctuaries, its sky-aspiring towers, seem founded upon this belief in the efficacy of the spoken spell, the reiterated invocation. Thousands of spirits, various and grotesque, the parents of ghosts and goblins of later day, haunted the surroundings of the temple, meaning the temple was safe, but the people were not. They battened up the remains of sacrifice, the leavings of the gorged gods. They flew through the night-bound streets and disturbed the dwellers in the houses. Demons with claw and talon, vampires, ghouls, all are there. Spirits blessed and unblessed, jinn, witch hags, lemurs, and sorrowing, unburied ghosts. No type of supernatural being appears to have been unknown to the imaginative Semites of old Chaldea. These, of course, must all be laid, exorcised, or placated. And it is not to be marvelled at that in such circumstances the trade of the necromancer flourished exceedingly. The witch or wizard, however, the unprofessional and detached practitioner with no priestly status, must beware. He or she was regarded with suspicion, and if one fell sick of a strange wasting or a disease to which he could not attach a name, the nearest sorcerer, male or female, real or imaginary, was in all probability brought to book. There were at least two classes of priests who dealt in the occult: the Baru, or seers, and the Ishipu, or wizard. The caste of Baru was a very ancient one, dating at least to the time of Hammurabi, 1800 BC. The Baru performed divination by consulting the livers of animals, and also by observing the flight of birds. We find many of the kings of Babylonia consulting this class of soothsayer. Sennacherib, for example, sought from the Baru the cause of his father's violent death. The Ishipu, on the other hand, was the remover of taboo and bans of all sorts. He chanted the rites described in the magical texts and performed the ceremony of atonement. He that stilleth all to rest, that pacifieth all, by whose incantations everything is at peace. The gods are upon his right hand and his left. They are behind and before him, everywhere, yet nowhere. The wizard and the witch were known as the Kasapu or Kasaptu. These were the sorcerers or magicians, and they were considered dangerous to the community. It is shown by the manner in which they are treated in the Code of Hammurabi, in which it is ordained that he who charges a man with sorcery and can justify the charge shall obtain the sorcerer's house, and the sorcerer plunged into the river. But if the sorcerer is not drowned, he who accused him would be put to death, and the wrongly accused man would have his house. What a devilish way to acquire property and protect the priesthood. So if anybody spoke up against the Shangu Makkhu, they would potentially lose their life and their house, leaving their family homeless or worse. Yes, it's all about protection from death. And people wonder why the people of Babylon never spoke up. The price for such an action is clear. A series of texts known as Makkhu provides us, among other things, a striking picture of the Babylonian witch. It tells how she prowls the streets, searching for victims, snatching love from handsome men, and withering beautiful women. At another time, she is depicted sitting in the shade of the wall, making spells and fashioning images. The suppliant prayers that her magic may revert upon herself, that the image of her which he has made, and doubtless rendered into the hands of the priest, shall be burnt by the fire god Usna, Deborah, the released deceiver, or deceiving seizure, in order that her words may be forced back into her mouth. May her mouth be fat, may her tongue be salt, continues the prayer. The Haltaf pen for Tlant, along with a sesame, is sent against her. O witch, like the circlet of this seal, may thy face grow green and yellow. So the origin of the green-faced hag is a curse by the Ishipu. An Assyrian text says of a sorceress that her bounds are the whole world, that she can pass over all mountains. The writer states that near his door he has posted a servant. On the right and the left of his door he set Lugal-Gira and Al-Lamu, in the hope that they might kill the witch. They would be the jinn gatekeepers, used by nobility to this very day to protect the entrance, the gateway to the palace prison. The library of Ashurbanipal contains many cuneiform tablets dealing with magic, but there is also extant many magical tablets from the later Babylonian Empire. Similar to the figure Enoch, they were not taken, they were transferred. These were known to the Babylonians by some name or word, indicating perhaps the special sphere of their activities. Thus we have the Makkhu, the burning, Serpu, consuming, Utuki Limnuti, evil spirits, and Labatu, the witch hag. These included many other texts dealing with magical practices. The Makkhu series deals with spells against the witches and wizards. images of whom are to be consumed by fire, accompanied by suitable spells and prayers. The Serpu series contains prayers and incantations against the taboo, that against evil spirits, provides the haunted with spells which will exorcise demons, ghosts, and the powers of the air generally, and place devils under a ban. The demons they spoke of were contained within the demon they invoked to dispel the demons. They are using the taboo to conceal the taboo. In other magical tablets, the diseases to which poor humanity is prone are guarded against, and instructions are given on the manner in which they may be transferred to the dead bodies of animals, usually swine or goats. So there we have a very different definition for the totemic gods and the anthropomorphic monsters, the spirits of the children of the fallen, who, like Lord Zu, wait in the wilderness to steal the role of God. The Toothache Myth. Before we begin, it is important to note that Sin, Suen, Lord Zu also means tooth, Pazuzu, who consumes the dead. And this would also be the origin of the term bookworm. These gods are merged with anything that causes pain and suffering, and therefore serves as an invocation method. It was trickery. The people of Babylon were fooled into worshipping the Anunnaki, as are you. The Assyrian physician, who would be named Azu, alternatively a Sin, had perforce to be something of a demonologist, as possession by devils was held to be the cause of divers and diseases. And we find incantations sprinkled upon prescriptions, I don't know, similar to a crown or string of jewels, the symbol of Anu, alternatively named Corona. One day we will learn how all of this is connected, and how ignorant we've been regarding these practices. Occasionally, too, we come upon the fag end of a folk tale, or dip momentarily into myth, as within a prescription for the toothache, a compounded fermented drink, the plant sakil bur, and oil, as highly effective as modern cures are, similar to, if not clove oil. The story attached to the cure is as follows. When Anu had created the heavens, the earth created the rivers the canals, and the canals the marshes, which in turn created the worm. And this worm is a bit of a twat, similar to Marduk, but this would also be the foundation of Babylon, built upon bitter waters, wormwood, one could say. This worm came weeping before Ea, saying, "What wilt thou give me for my food? What wilt thou give me for my devouring?" "I will give thee ripe figs," replied the god. "Ripe figs and scented wood." "Bah," replied the worm, "what are ripe figs to me? What is scented wood? Let me drink among the teeth." and batten on the gums, that I may devour blood of the teeth and the strength thereof. In the outer darkness there will be weeping and wailing and gnashing of teeth. This tale alludes to the Babylonian superstition that worms consume the teeth. Now sin is also tooth or wisdom, and that, my dear friends, is where we get the bookworm. Teeth can also be teeth, meaning 1/10 of the sacrifice, drinking among the teeth and devouring the blood thereof. The ancient Ashipu merged medical practice with witchcraft, and this practice did not end in Babylon. The Anunnaki and the word of power. As in Egypt, the word of power was held in great reverence by the magicians of Chaldea, who believed that the name, preferably a secret name, of a god possessed sufficient force in its mere syllables to defeat and scatter hordes of the evil things that surrounded and harassed mankind. The names of Ea and Merodach were perhaps most frequently used to carry out destruction into the ranks of the demon army. Together they would be bitter waters, the god of the abyss, and the personification of death and slaughter. It is also necessary to know the name of the devil or person whom his spells were directed. If so, this could be added with a piece of hair, or the nail parings in the case of a human being. If so, then a special efficacy was given to the enchantment. This would be witchcraft, voodoo, the magic that they do so well. But just as hair or nails were part of a man, so was his name. That's me totally fucked, isn't it? Yeah. And also to the great virtue ascribed to names in art magic, both ancient and modern. The name was, as it were, the vehicle by means of which the magician established a link between himself and the victim. And the Babylonians, in exorcising sickness or disease of any kind, were wanton to recite long catalogues of the names of evil spirits and demons, in the hope that they, by doing so, might shine the light upon that especial individual who was the cause of the problem. But in fact they are literally invoking a legion of demons. Even long lists of names of persons who had died by premature death were often recited in order to ensure that they would not return to torment the living. I will guarantee that the names of the people are derived from the same gods. The Babylonian Vampires. In all lands and epochs, the grisly conception of the vampire has gained a strong hold upon the imagination of common people, and this was no less the case in Babylonia and Assyria than elsewhere. There have not been wanting those who believe that vampirism was confined to the Slavic race alone, and that the peoples of Russia, Bohemia, and the Balkan Peninsula were the sole possessors of the vampire legend. Recent research, however, has exposed the fallacy of this theory, and has shown that, far from being the property of the Slavs or Aryan peoples, this horrible belief is or was the possession of practically every race, savage or civilized, that is known to anthropology. 7 are they. The 7 evil spirits are, among other things, vampires of no uncertain type. An ancient poem which was chanted by them is as follows. This is no different from the Grigori, who, as punishment, were to sing the praises of humanity. But this hymn is for them. Their names vary, but their number does not. 7 are they, 7 are they. In the ocean deep, 7 are they. Battering in heaven, 7 are they. Bred in the depths of the ocean, 7 are they. Not male nor female are they, but are the roaming wind blast. No wife have they, no son can they beget, knowing neither mercy nor pity. They hearken not to prayer, to prayer. They are the horses reared amid the hills, the evil ones of Ea. Throne bearers to the gods are they. They stand in the highway to befoul the path. Evil are they, evil are they. 7 are they, 7 are they. Twice 7 are they. Destructive storms and evil winds are they. An evil blast that heraldeth the baneful storm. An evil blast, forerunner of the baleful storm. They are mighty children, mighty sons, heralds of the pestilence, throne bearers of Ereshkigal. They are the flood which rusheth through the land. 7 gods of the broad earth. 7 robber gods are they. 7 gods of might. 7 evil demons. 7 evil demons of oppression. 7 in heaven. 7 on earth. Spirits that minish heaven and earth. Spirits that minish the land, of giant strength and giant tread. Demons like raging bulls, great ghosts, ghosts that break through all houses, demons that have no shame. 7 are they, knowing no care, they grind the land like corn. Knowing no mercy, they rage against mankind. They spill their blood like rain, devouring their flesh and sucking their veins. They are demons full of violence, ceaselessly devouring blood. Most of these lines mirror the legend of Zu, sin, but this last line clearly indicates their character as vampires. They are akin to the Rakshasas of India, or the archdemons of Zoroastrianism. Such demons are also to be seen in the Polynesian tea. the Malayan Hantu Penyadin, a dog-headed water demon, similar to Saint Christopher. And the Kephu of the Karens. Yes, that is where we get the term Karen, which, under the form of a wizard's head and stomach, devours human souls, and the modern term would be a Karen. Taylor considered vampires to be causes conceived in spiritual form to account for specific facts of a wasting disease. I'd say it was an invocational method used to trick the people and invoke them publicly. Afanansieff regards them as thunder gods and spirits of the storm, who, during winter slumber, in their cloud coffins, to rise again in spring and draw moisture from the clouds. The Abkalmet's difficulty in believing in vampires was that he could not understand how a spirit could leave its grave and return thence with ponderable matter in the form of blood, leaving no traces, showing that the surface of the earth above the grave had not been stirred. But this view may be solved of the precipitation of matter. The Anunnaki, the Bible, and magic, from gods, once demons. The earliest biblical account of anything supposed to be connected with magic is found in the history of Rachel, when with her sister Leah and her husband Jacob, she had left her house of her father. Rachel had stole the images that were her father's. Then Laban overtook Jacob, alternatively the White One, who overtook the substitute. And Laban the White One said, "Yet wherefore hast thou stolen my gods?" And Jacob answered and said, "With whomsoever thou findest thou gods, let him not live. Before our brethren, discern thou what is thine with me, and take it to thee." For Jacob knew not that Rachel had stolen them. And Laban went into Jacob's tent, and into Leah's tent, and into the two maidservants' tent, but he found them not. Then he went out of Leah's tent, and entered into Rachel's tent. Now Rachel had taken the images, and put them in the camel's furniture, and sat upon them. And Laban searched all the tent, but found them not. And she said to her father, "Let it not displease my lord, that I cannot rise up before thee." And he searched, but found not the images. This passage has given no little trouble to commentators, but most of them seem to consider these teraphim, or images, as something of a magical nature. Jacob the substitute can mean the seal of Aya, alongside the weary Leah, which can mean to wear you down and make you old before your time. Enki, Aya, Aya is the substitute for the original oracle, Lord Zu, alternatively Sin, the White One, and a synonym of weary and delicate is Decay, a synonym of Merodach, so that is Aya, Iya, Enki, alongside Merodach. And here, the White One overtook the substitute. Am I the only one that can see that the coin has been flipped? I think not. Of course, that was similar to Leia and the Swan. The Speaking Head. The Targum of Jonathan ben Uziel gives us the following version of the account of the Teraphim with Rachel. And Rachel stole the images, the Teraphim. Like Enoch, they were not taken, they were transferred. She stole the Teraphim of her father, for they had murdered a man who was a firstborn, and having cut off his head, similar to the soldiers of Alexander in Babylon. They embalmed it with salt and spices, and they wrote divinations upon a plate of zuzu, gold, and put it under his tongue, and placed it against the wall. And it conversed with them, and Laban, the White One, worshipped it. One of many of the positions where the Udug-hul, where the Anunnaki, the Teraphim, were positioned. All of them, like the Anunnaki, are identified as tricksters and thieves, as it continues. And Jacob stole the science, the magic, the demonology of Laban, the White One, the Syrian, the Assyrian. So Jacob stole the tablet of Babylonmancy, in order that Laban might not discover his departure. Babylonmancy, which became Rhabdomancy, was used to gain direction from the god Bel. Bel Sin, Bel Zu, know thy enemy. The Persian translation gives us astrolabes instead of teraphim, or simply images, and implies that they were instruments of judical astrology, Babylonmancy, from Mulban, the bow star from heaven. Alternatively, Laban, the cursed bow, the wolf bow, the red clay bow, and it is most certainly Babylonmancy, as Rachel stole them to prevent their father from discovering their root. At all events, the teraphim were means of divination among believers and unbelievers. They were known among the Egyptians and among Syrians, what makes it extremely probable that they were not objects of religious worship is that it does not appear from any other passage that Laban was an idolater, besides which Rachel, who was certainly a worshipper of the true God, took them, it seems, on the account of their supposed supernatural powers. To be fair, these powers were invoked by burning an innocent lamb. And I ask you, has this text not scolded Rachel? She is also described as a thief and a liar, as is Jacob. It must, however, be observed that some have supposed these teraphim to have been talismans for the cure of diseases. The Anunnaki are also defined as diseases, cures for diseases, and others were really idols. And Rachel stole them to put an end to her father's idolatry. She sat upon them and kept them a secret, which is, I'm afraid, part of the ritual. See the Makkhu tablet. There is not a very dissimilar account related in Judges 18 of Micah and his teraphim, which seems sufficient that the use of them was not considered inconsistent with the profession of true religion. In fact, I'd say the 7 are the most consistent part. Their names change, but their number does not. They are gods, once demons. Many of the Babylonian gods retained traces of their primitive demoniacal characteristics, and this applies to the great triad, Ea, Anu, and Enlil, who probably evolved into a godhead from an animistic group of nature spirits. In the exorcism rituals, the demon was transferred into the animal, hence the term animal spirits. They are not, in fact, nature spirits. They are not the spirits of nature. Each of these gods were accompanied by demon groups, the 7. The diseased demons were the beloved sons of Bel. The Fates were the 7 daughters of Anu, and the 7 storm demons, the children of Ea. Evil are they, 7 are they. Here lies my confusion on why people believe Ea is the good god. He replaced the storm god, the oracle, and Zu, and now the 7 are his children. Ea, the earth, and Zu, the storm. The 7 in heaven, 7 on earth, 7 are they. Their names vary, but their number, 7, does not. In magical incantations describing the primitive monster form of Ea, yes, he has a monstrous alter ego, identifying Enki as an Udug Hull, a demon, as here, good and bad can't be told apart. Ea's monster form. His head is like a serpent, the ears are those of a basilisk, his horns are twisted into curls. The meaning of Baal, to entwine, twist, convulse. His body is a sunfish, full of stars, the gods within the belly of the beast, Pazuzu. Pazuzu was Ea's alter ego. Marduk Azaru introduced the patient to Ea, in turn invoking Pazuzu, the king of demons, to expel the demons contained within Pazuzu. It is trickery. And similar to Pazuzu, Ea's feet are armed with claws, like the bird god, and the sole of his foot has no heel. Ea was the great magician of the gods. His sway over the forces of nature was secured by the performance of magical rites, and his services were obtained, who performed requisite ceremonies and repeated appropriate spells. Although he might be worshipped in the temple at Eridu, he could also be conjured in mud huts, otherwise known as the Great Mound. The latter, indeed, as in Mexico, appear to have been the oldest holy places of the gods, once demons. The Legend of Ura. it is told that Ura, the dread demon of disease, once made up his mind to destroy mankind. But Ishnu, his counselor, appeased him so that he abandoned his intention and gave humanity a chance to escape. Almost as if it was a threat from the priesthood itself. Whoever should praise Ura and magnify his name, he said, rule the four quarters of the world, and should have none to oppose him. When disease is a weapon, no one can oppose it. The four winds surround the earth. It is known as the outer darkness, where there is weeping and wailing and gnashing of teeth. He should have no one to oppose him. He should not die in pestilence, and his speech should bring him in favor with the great ones of the earth. Wherever a tablet with the Song of Ura was set up, in that house there should be immunity from the pestilence. As we read in the closing lines of the Gilgamesh epic, the dead were often left unburied in Babylonia, and the ghosts of those, as in modern times, were supposed to haunt the living until given proper treatment. I believe this is a ruse for the foundation of the funeral service, as is the Epic of Gilgamesh. But what I see in the description is the demon created by Enki to release the Anunnaki from their palace prison, namely Shangu Makkhu, who, in the backstory of the descent of Ishtar, the backstory being the release of the Anunnaki, Ishtar's twin self, Ereshkigal, cursed Shangu Makkhu, forced him to live in the shadows, the outer darkness, and was to seek sustenance from the garbage and gutters, which is almost identical to the description here. They roamed the streets and alleyways, seeking for sustenance among the garbage in the gutters, and looking for haunted houses in which to dwell, denied as they were the shelter of the grave, which was regarded as the true home of the dead. That is, only after the Epic of Gilgamesh, after the death of another child of Ea, Enkidu, similar to Shangu Makkhu. He is not a child, but a creature of Enki. Evil are they, 7 are they, the children of Ea are they. Sumerian A or E. That is what they mean, and that is how Ea warns us of the coming flood. It would appear that Ea did not warn us. The warning is contained within the meaning of Ea, as are his children, and that would be how Ea warned Utnapishtim, the Babylonian Noah, of the coming flood through the reeds of the underworld. These spirits, the children of Ea, frequently terrified children into madness or death, and bitterly mocked those in tribulation, similar to transgenderism. Now this is where we get the truth, but they were not outcasts because of improper burial, but because they sacrificed to the gods. By doing so, they are not feeding on garbage. they are permitted to feed upon the living, and it's very odd because they do need permission. They were, in fact, the outcasts of mortality, the immortals, one could say, spiteful and venomous, because they had not been properly treated. Yes, immortality with a twist. And now there is weeping and wailing and gnashing of teeth. It is their master who has tricked them, who is not treating them properly. It is not immortality, but longevity, but not in the human sense. It comes with a price that affects your soul. And I say longevity over immortality, because they are being consumed in the belly of the beast, who is a soul eater, metaphorically speaking, sustenance, the garbage of mankind. Consuming, sin to swallow. The modern race, which most nearly approximates to the Babylonian in its treatment of and attitude to the dead, seems to be the Burmese, who are extremely circumspect, meaning leer, weary, unwilling. They were careful as to how they speak and act towards the inhabitants of the spirit world, as they believe that disrespect or mockery will bring down upon them misfortune or disease. An infinite number of guardian spirits are included in the Burman demonological system, a legion, like the protector spirit of ancient Babylon, Pazuzu. They dwell in their houses and are protectors of the village communities and even of clans. They were duly appeased. Rice, beer, and tea salad were offered to them. But in the Burman, women are employed as exorcists for driving out evil spirits. The frontman of Pazuzu, the Ashipu, meaning exorcist, were originally women. The Anunnaki and their dark purification ritual. Purification by water entered largely into Babylonian magic. The ceremony known as the incantation of Eridu, so frequently alluded to in Babylonian magical texts, was probably some form of purification by water, relating as it does to the home of Ea. I have to add, it is not the sea, but the abyss, a metaphor of those punished by the flood and the children thereof. Another ceremony prescribes the mingling of water, the merger of Abzu and Tiamat, producing Mamu, chaos. And this, my dear friends, is the taboo, Mamet, as Mamet, the taboo, refers to a barrier, a gate, one could say, a barrier that none can pass. In line with the ceremony prescribing the mingling of water from a pool that no hand has touched, referring to the waters of the abyss. The mingling of water. This was mixed with tamarisk, a magic wand. Abraham planted a tamarisk tree as a memorial to commemorate God's covenant with him. Jacob stole the science. His concubines stole the teraphim, and Solomon built a sanctuary, a Inanna, for Shemos, the son of Sin, Shamash. And of course he was working openly with demons to build his temple. Now, if we were to put all of that together, we would see, similar to Enoch, that these were not taken, but transferred from the incantation of Eridu, a city built by Cain for his son Enoch. This incantation is more like a recipe, the mingling of water with tamarisk, mastakal, ginger, alkali, and mixed wine. I googled this recipe, and I found it in one of the first American cookbooks: chicken and saffron with ginger and rose water. Therein must be placed a shining ring, and this mixture was poured upon the patient. A root of saffron is then taken and pounded with pure salt, and alkali, and the fat of a Makkhu bird brought from the mountains. This strange mixture is to be used to anoint the patient. Now what would you say if somebody was basting you like a fucking turkey? Because that is exactly what this is. The Anunnaki and the chamber of their priest-magician, and the treatment of a case by a Babylonian physician-magician. The proceeding is esoteric, obscure, meaning not known about or understood by many people. But by the aid of imagination, as well as the assistance of Babylonian representation, we can construct a clear picture. The chamber of the sage, similar to the position of the Anunnaki idols within the home, is almost certain to be situated in some nook, in one of those vast, imposing temples, which more closely resemble cities rather than mere temples. We draw the curtain and enter a rather darksome room. The atmosphere is pungent with chemical odors, and positioned on shelves, disposed upon the tile walls, are numerous jars, great and small, containing the fearsome compounds which the practitioner applies to the sufferings of Babylonian humanity. The Ashipu, shaven and strict, meaning cold and unfeeling, asks us what we desire of him, and in the role of Babylonian citizens, we acquaint him with the fact that our lives are made miserable for us by a witch, who sends upon us misfortune after misfortune. Imagine living in a time like that. Sorry. Now the blight, or some equally intractable, horrible disease. Now an evil wind. Now unspeakable enchantments, which torment unceasingly. In his capacity as Zu, or Azu, as a physician, Ashipu meaning exorcist, or sorcerer, the Ashipu examines our bodies, shrunken and exhausted with fever or rheumatism, and having prescribed for us, compounds the mixture with his own hands, and enjoins us to its regular application. That would be the purification, alternatively a basting ritual. The Anunnaki are possessing spirits, and they are said to wear ni, melem, fear, which is described as a substance. The people who were anointed were living in fear. Could this substance, this purification, be ni, melem, fear, the radiance of the gods? He mixes various ingredients in a stone mortar, whispering his spells a while, with many a prayer to Ea, the beneficent, and Merodach, the all-powerful, that we may be restored to health. Ea the beneficent, Merodach restore to health. Ea represents the flood and the offspring of the deep, Merodach meaning death and slaughter, and is the symbol of resurrecting the dead. The ghost needs a host. Then he promises to visit at our dwelling, and gravely says goodbye, or Awesia, good luck, after expressing the hope that we will graciously contribute to the upkeep to the house of religion to which he is attached. Leaving the darkened haunt of the Ishipu for the brilliant sunshine of a Babylonian summer afternoon, we are first inclined to forget our fears and laugh away horrible superstitions. But as night approaches, we grow more fearful. We crouch with the children in the darkest corner. In the nook, in the nook, in the nook. The opening for the shadow creature. A gate, one could say, crouched in the darkest corner of our clay brick dwelling, to tear from us our little ones. Or a rat rustling in the straw may seem to us the Alu demon. The ghosts of the dead gibber at the threshold after clay brick dwelling, and tremble at every sound. The rushing of the wind overhead is to us the noise of the Labatu, the hag demon, come hither to tear from us our little ones. The ghosts of the dead gibber at the threshold, and even pale Uni, the lord of disease, he may glance through a tiny window. The Ib, the nook, the angle, the corner, the opening, the window, with ghastly countenance and eager, zoo, red eyes. The pains of rheumatism assail us. Ha, the evil witch is at work, thrusting thorns into waxen images made in our shape, that we may suffer the torment brought about by sympathetic magic, to which we would rather refer our aches and pains, rather than to the circumstances that we dwell hard by the river swamp. A loud knocking resounds at the door, nevermore. We tremble anew, and the children scream. At last, the dread powers of the evil have come to summon us to the final ordeal, or perhaps the witch herself, grown bold by reason of her immunity, has come to wreak fresh vengeance. Witch finding in ancient Babylon. The evil witch is at work, thrusting thorns into waxen images, made in our shape that we may suffer the torment brought about by sympathetic magic. A loud knocking resounds at the door. We tremble anew, and the children scream. At last, the dread powers of evil have come to summon us to the final ordeal, or perhaps the witch herself, grown bold by the reason of her immunity, has come to wreak fresh vengeance. The flimsy door of boards is blown open, and to our unspeakable belief, the stern face of the Ishipu appears beneath the flickering light. We shout with joy, and the children cluster around the priest, clinging to his garment. I think we've already found our witch. The priest smiles at our fear, and monitoring us to sit in a circle, produces several wax figures of demons, which he places on the floor. It is noticeable that these figures are bound with miniature ropes. Marduk's alternative name is Azaru, meaning to bind. Marduk was bound to the seven. The Egyptian Osiris is also known as Azaru, and he was torn apart and then bound back together from several parts. And this was done to Osiris by Set, the war god. Azaru, to bind, is also the name of the red angel Uriel, the angel who collected the red clay from which to form man. What they mean is the teraphim, the Anunnaki, and this is related to the several wax demons created by the priest, taking one of these in the shape of a Labatu or hag demon. The priest makes an offering to the demons and places before it 12 small cakes representing the original zodiac, the brood of Tiamat. And don't forget, Zuzu means gold or sweet. These cakes are made from a peculiar kind of meal. I think we all know what's inside there, don't we? The food of the gods. Lest we forget, the gods are like vampires. Yes. He is invoking Pazuzu. The next part touches on the Pit-Pi ritual, awakening the statue of Pazuzu. Elu-M, awakening the watchers from their slumber, as he then pours out a libation, places the image of a small dog besides that of the witch, lays a piece of the heart of a young pig on the mouth of the figure, and some white bread and a box of ointment beside it. He then chants something like the following: "May a guardian spirit be present at my side when I draw unto the sick person, when I examine his muscles, when I compose his limbs, when I sprinkle the water of Aya upon him, avoid thee, whether thou art an evil spirit, or an evil demon, an evil ghost, or an evil devil, an evil god, or an evil fiend, hag demon, ghoul, sprite, phantom or wraith, or any disease, fever, headache, shivering, or any sorcery, spell or enchantment. Ironically, the Ashipu is the sorcerer. The ointment offered to the demons was probably snake oil. Having recited such words of power, the Ashipu then directs us to keep the figure at the head of our bed for 3 nights, then to bury it beneath the earthen floor. But alas, no cure results. Fee, fo, fi, fum, I smell the blood of a black mass, where everything is reversed. For example, being buried and then rising 3 days later. The Ashipu, Marduk, and the Anunnaki revel in raising the dead from within the mud hut, the realm of Ea, the gods of the abyss. The witch still torments us by day and by night, and once more we have recourse to our priest doctor. The ceremony is gone through again, probably repeated over 7 days. But still the family health does not improve. The little ones suffer from fever, and bad luck constantly dogs us. After a stormy scene between husband and wife, who differ, argue over the qualifications of the Ashipu, and another practitioner is called in. He is younger and more enterprising than the last, and he has not yet learned that half the business of the Ashipu is to nurse his patients, that is, in the financial sense of the term, whereas the elderly Ashipu had gone quietly home to bed after prescribing for us this young physician, who has his intention to be successful. After being consulted, goes home to his clay surgery and looks for an appropriate Ashipu exorcism ritual. The next day, armed with this wordy weapon, he arrives at our dwelling, placing a waxen image of a witch upon the floor, vents upon it in the full force of his rhetoric. This is the voodoo that I do so well, probably. As he is on the point of leaving, screams resound from a neighboring cabin, bestowing upon us a look of the deepest meaning. Our Ashipu darts to the hut opposite and hails forth an ancient crone. I remind you that the Ashipu was the banker, so he's setting up an exorcism next door to a property he may want to acquire, because if you prove that the person is a witch, you gained their property. Now go ahead, tell me that this doesn't sound a wee bit fishy. The appearance of the person living next door, the so-called crone, was old, and together with her illness, gave her a most sinister look. I'd say she's being targeted, and the Ashipu are playing with a fire they do not understand, a fire they no longer understand. This is mirrored, it is indirect. The Ashipu used the idols, then he uses the young man, who then uses the old woman next door, and all of the aforementioned are related in some way or form to demonic possession. All of this grief and strife would create the food for the gods. Ni Melum Fear. The fool, the priest, smiles at our fear. The old woman next door. At once we recognize her as a wretch, a blight, who dared to menace our children, due to the psychological damage achieved by the Ishipu, meaning the fear they conjured within the family, ironically due to the witchcraft used by the Ishipu. The witch is said to have menaced the children when in innocent play, like wearing a gimp suit to a nursery. They cast hot ashes upon her thatched roof and introduce hot swamp water into her cistern. Who is menacing who? Who is using wax figurines, scaring the shit out of people, using incantations and dabbling with demons? The Ishipu, of course. In so-called righteous wrath, we lay hands on the abandoned being, who for so many months has cast a blight upon our lives. She exclaims that the pains of death have seized upon her, and we laugh in triumph. What a bunch of dicks. For they know that the superior magic, the voodoo that they do so well, has taken effect. On the way to the river, we are joined by neighbors, who rejoice with us, and by doing this publicly, they spread the mental disease, fear, doubt, and suspicion, and also how to take a property you desire. Rejoice with us, in that we have caught the witch. Great is the satisfaction of the party, when at last the devilish crone is cast headlong into the stream. But here, many seconds pass, we begin to look incredulously, in a manner of disbelief, upon each other, for the wicked one refuses to sink. This means she is innocent, and the whole party are guilty, which means they should be put to death, and the old woman takes their house. They may be working together. I would like to know how many times this method was successful. Probably 0, because we all float. Then the awful moment, the realization that they were wrong, and the price they pay. The old woman is dying, and the family will be put to death. The children are enslaved, and the houses go to the Ishipu, the banker, pronounced wanker. The awful moment when every eye is directed upon them, the family, who were so happy and light-hearted a moment before. We tremble, for we know how severe are the laws against the indiscriminate accusation of those suspected of witchcraft, meaning it is also used to protect the Ishipu, not the people but the Ishipu, those dabbling in witchcraft. As the ancient crone continues to float, a loud murmuring arises from the crowd, and with quaking limbs and eyes full of terror, we snatch up our children and make a dash for freedom. For I was right about the consequences of such actions, and all of this terror benefits the Ishipu. Only the Ishipu could prove somebody was a witch. Nobody else was qualified. In fact, it was forbidden to the general public. Luckily, the Ishipu accompanies us so that the crowd dare not pursue. And indeed, so absurdly changeable is human nature. Most of the crowd are busied in rescuing the old woman. In a few minutes, we have placed all immediate danger of pursuit behind us. The Ishipu has departed to his temple because he was the accuser, and becomes richer in the experience by the lesson of a false prescription. After a hurried consultation, we quit the town. We leave. Exodus, one could say, skirt the arable land which surrounds it, and plunge into the desert. She who was opposed to the employment of a young and inexperienced Ishipu does not make any matters better by reiterating, "I fucking told you so." And he who favored a second opinion on paying a night visit to the city discovers that the witch has succumbed to her harsh treatment, that her house has been made over to her relatives by way of compensation. This is how the Ishipu get out of things when they are caught in the act. Yes, I'm right. It's because a legal process has been taken out against him, the father of the family. But of course it was the Ishipu who made the claim, and what happened to them is now silenced. Returning to his wife, he acquaints her with the sad news, and hand in hand with their weeping offspring, they turn and face the desert. Babylonian demons were a legion, and most of them exceedingly malevolent. Legion refers to a large group. It may simply mean many, and was used to refer to a group of demons. The earliest account of the exorcism allegedly performed by Jesus existed in the Gospel of Mark. The Gospel of Luke, they shortened the story, which retained most of the details. And then in the Gospel of Matthew, they shortened the account dramatically and created a Makkhu, a twin, because the possessed man is not alone. In the Gospel of Matthew, the one becomes two. In this version, the demons are unnamed. In Babylon, they are the legion, known as the Udug-hul, said to be good and bad demons, but who can't be told apart, also known as tricksters and deceivers. And I'm afraid that is where you get the good. There is no good. Their joy is in evil, hence the Udug-hul, a pitfall demonic being who gets joy from evil. Another connection with the Anunnaki and the problem with this account, fearing that Jesus would drive them out of the world and into the abyss, the Abzu. They beg him instead to cast them into a herd of pigs on a nearby hill, which he does, but I don't think so. The pigs then rush into the sea, the Abzu, and are drowned. The demon's intention is to be freed from the abyss. It appears to be lex talionis, an eye for an eye, a soul for a soul. Why would the demons fear the abyss, then drown themselves in the sea? The demon's purpose is said to be to kill the host. According to this account, Jesus allowed it, but I don't think so. The only other figure who could do so was Pazuzu, and I remind you of the goddess Bao, meaning domestic pig. And when the bow breaks, the cradle will fall, the complaint of the offspring of Zu, and that would be Legion. And the term Bao now referring to being placed within a goddess, alternatively domestic pig. Babylonian demons were legion, and most of them exceedingly malevolent. The Udughu, or Utukku. Utu is the son of sin, but of course there is no connection, although there clearly is. The Utukku, the Utu plus Ku, was an evil spirit that lurked generally in the desert. Pazuzu is a dust demon, the devil in the desert, as is the fallen angel Azazel. Dudael was his prison in the desert, where it lay in wait for unsuspecting travelers, but did not confine its haunts to the more barren places, for it was also to be found among the mountains, in graveyards, and even in the sea. An evil fate befell the man upon whom it looked. The Rabesu is another lurking demon that secretes itself in unfrequented spots to leap upon the passers-by. The Labatu is strangely enough spoken of as the daughter of Anu. She was supposed to dwell in the mountains or in marshy places, and was particularly addicted to the destruction of children. Possibly originally a goddess opposed to the children of the Abzu, Legion, and because of this demon, Pazuzu was needed, as Babylonian mothers were wanton to hang charms of Pazuzu around their children's necks to guard them against the horrible hag, and that is how they tricked people into invoking Pazuzu publicly. The Sedu, or Shedu, appears, like Pazuzu, to have been, in some senses, a guardian spirit. It is often appealed to at the end of an invocation, along with the Lamassu, a spirit of a similar type. These malign influences were probably prototypes of the Arabian jinn, to whom they have many points of resemblance. A spirit being cast into a person reminds me of the anthropomorphic demons. Many Assyrian spirits were half human, half supernatural, and some of them were supposed to contract unions with human beings, the Illuminati, the illuminated ones. Lu, light bright shining, treachery, lies, deceit. Are we not illuminated, enlightened? In this regard, the Assyrian spirits were similar to the Arabian jinn. The union is the good from the good and bad Udughu, ash, dust, or clay, cognate with one, unique, alone, wish, desire, wolf, curse, and spider. The offspring of such unions was supposed to be a spirit called Alu, which haunted ruins and deserted buildings, and indeed entered the houses of people like a ghost in order to steal their sleep. Ghosts were common enough, and those who had not been buried were almost certain to return to harass mankind. It was even dangerous to look upon a corpse, lest the spirit, or Ed Imu, of the dead man should seize the beholder. Labatu the Caesar, Dibara the Caesar, Dib, Dab, cognate with Lu, light bright shining, treachery, lies, and deceit. They are the shining ones. They are a legion. Many names, many faces, the entity. Legion refers to the seizure of souls. The Assyrians seem to be of the opinion that a ghost, like a vampire, might drain away the strength of the living, and long formulas were in existence containing numerous names of haunting spirits, one of which it was hoped would apply to the tormenting ghost, the poltergeist, and these were used in the purpose of exorcism. To lay a spirit, the following articles were necessary: 7 small loaves of roast corn, the hoof of a dark-coloured ox, flour of roast corn, and a little leaven. The ghosts were then asked why they tormented the haunted man. The flour and leaven were kneaded into a paste in the horn of an ox, the horn of abundance, the cornucopia, and then one for my peeps. A small libation is poured into a hole in the earth, a libation for those in the pit or abyss. The leavened dough was then placed in the hoof of an ox. The word God also means bull, ox, or carp, so it could easily be a mistranslation. Alternatively, one could do it in a bull or carp, which would indicate that it was not the same ceremony, when in fact it is. The fish god is the good god. I'm afraid that depends on perspective. The leavened dough was placed into the hoof, and then a libation is poured out with the incantations to the god Shamash, Utu, the Ayazu, the son of sin, the offspring of the blade, a symbol of justice, Shamash. In another case, figures of the dead man and the living man to whom the spirit has appeared are to be made, the voodoo that they do so well, and libations are poured out. Could that be the change in the Gospel of Matthew, where the person changes into 2, Moses, Moshe, Mashu, kid or twin he-goat? I believe so. It isn't just a belief, it is a fact. Then the figure, like the Apkalu in the witchcraft, is to be buried, and that of the living man to be purified with water. But that water would be from the Abzu, so it may also refer to Legion, the Abzu. The whole ceremony being typical of sympathetic magic, which thus supposed the burial of the body of the ghost and the purification of the living man. In the morning, incense was to be offered up before the sun god Shamash at his rising. That means everything done during the night was attributed to Sin, his father, Lord Zu. Sweet woods are also to be burned, and a libation of sesame wine poured out. If a human being was troubled by a ghost, it was necessary that he should be anointed. The texts have implied that he was the chosen one, and this in a totally different context. They were to be anointed with various substances, similar to dressing the dead in the funeral rite. The anointing was done in order that the result of the ghostly contact might be nullified. In modern baptism, it is said to be done to indicate that you are a follower of Christ, or Ayazu, but the subject here is demonic possession, and this is probably why anointing also means afflicting. And that would be the difference between Jesus and Ayazu, like my name, An-D. It is a derivative from the old gods. The reason we use these names is because of the kings and queens. The people followed suit to protect their children, and that is how they normalized invocational names within society. In the same way, I have no connection to the eagle god. I say Jesus has no connection to Ayazu, apart from the name being the root derivative. To finish, an old text says, "When the ghost appeareth in the house of a man, there will be destruction of that house. When it speaketh and hearkeneth for an answer, the man will die, and there will be lamentation." The author of the Lamentation Rite. That would be the offspring of Absu, of the deep, of the abyss. The abyss, the realm of Legion. The taboo. The belief in taboo was universal in ancient Chaldea. Among the Babylonians, it was known as Mamit. The net of Mamit was a snare, a trap laid for the wicked, which may have a double meaning, laid for the wicked. In the Bible, it would be the outer darkness, where there is weeping and wailing and gnashing of teeth, within the teeth of their god. There were taboos on many things, but especially upon corpses and uncleanliness of all kinds. We find the taboo generally alluded to in a text as the barrier that none can pass. Among all barbarous peoples, the taboo is usually intended to hedge, meaning to block or fence off. In the sacred thing, the item of taboo, from the profane person or the common people, but it may also be employed for sanitary reasons. Thus, the flesh of certain animals, such as the bow, the pig, may not be eaten in hot countries. Food must not be prepared by those who are in the slightest degree suspected of uncleanliness. and these laws are usually of the most rigorous character. But should a man violate the taboo placed upon certain foods, then he himself often became taboo. No one is allowed to speak to him, as he has become part of the taboo. He was left to his own devices, and, in short, became a sort of pariah, meaning an outcast, untouchable. This may be why Tiamat is unreachable and unkillable, similar to the worship of Sin, Lord Zu, the worship of whom is undesirable, untouchable, and rejected, all of which are synonyms of pariah, of the taboo, the outcast. Another synonym for the taboo may be leper. It may serve to conceal the worshippers of sin. Cleansing a leper is one of the miracles of Jesus. It may reflect saving the person from sin, the taboo. In the Assyrian texts, we find many instances of this kind of taboo, and numerous were the supplications that these might be removed. If somebody drank water from an unclean cup, he had violated a taboo. Like the Arab, he might not lick the plate clean. If he were taboo, he may not touch another man. He may not converse with him. He may not pray to the gods. He may not be interceded for by anyone else. In fact, he was excommunicated, put into exile. If a man cast his eye upon water which another person had washed his hands in, or if he came into contact with a person who had not yet performed his ablutions, he became unclean. An entire purification ritual was necessary on any Assyrian who touched or even looked upon a dead man. It may be asked, why was the elaborate cleanliness essential to avoid taboo? The answer undoubtedly is because of the belief in the power of sympathetic magic. If one were to come into contact with a person who was in any way unclean, or with a corpse, or other unpleasant object, he was supposed to come within the radius of the evil, which emanated from Mam-it, the taboo, the net of Mamit. The superstitions in ancient Babylon. The evil eye refers to the builders, the Igigi. The term builder really meaning architect, as seen in the demons of Solomon, who built the second temple, and therefore the first and the last. The source of the information is said to come from the oracle, the watcher, whose symbol is an eye, whose way is an eye for an eye, and his stone is lapis lazuli. Now we begin. The superstition that the evil eye of a witch or wizard might bring blight upon an individual or community was as persistent in Chaldea as elsewhere. Incantations frequently allude to it as among the causes of sickness, and exorcisms were duly directed against it. Even today, Upon the site of the ruins of Babylon, children are protected against it by fastening small blue objects to their headgear. Lapis lazuli, blue, alternatively a sapphire. Just as mold from a grave was supposed by the witches of the Middle Ages to be particularly effective in magic, so was the dust in the temple supposed to possess a hidden virtue in Assyria. If one pared one's nails or cut one's hair, it was considered necessary to bury them, lest a sorcerer should discover them and use them against their late owner. For sorcery performed upon a part, meaning helping to achieve something, was by the law of sympathetic magic, and was thought to reflect upon the whole. A similar superstition is attached to the discarding of clothing. That is probably why Anzu, Red Sky, is a clothing charity located in Britain. Anzu is the oracle and the demon of the deep, affecting, not protecting. For among the barbarian and the uncultured folk, their clothing was regarded as part and parcel of the man. There seems to be a weird connection to DNA here, and DNA is in the symbol of a building, the pyramid. Builder could refer to something else, something we do not yet understand. Here it refers to building a bridge for the curse, a gateway, one could say. Even in our time, simple and uneducated people tear a piece from their garments and hang it as an offering on the bushes around any of the numerous wells in the country that they may have journeyed to. This is a survival of the custom of sacrificing the part for the whole. For example, Sin, Lord Zu, who is Anunnaki yet not Anunnaki, and again similar to the parent of the Anunnaki, but again similar to the crucifixion of Jesus. Remember, he died for your sin, Zu. The worship of sin is unchangeable. It is universal in all of the texts I've read. To continue, if one desired to get rid of a headache, hold on a minute, it was necessary to bury them, referring to nail clippings or hair, lest a sorcerer should get hold of them. And here one willingly had to take the hair of a young kid and give it to a wise woman, who would spin it on the right side and double it on the left. Then, similar to Solomon's knot, it was bound into 14 knots, and the incantation of Ea, the offspring of the deep, was pronounced upon it, after which it was to be bound round the head and neck of the sick man. For defects in eyesight, the Assyrians wove black and white threads or hairs together while muttering incantations, and these were placed upon the eyes. It was thought, too, that the tongues of evil spirits or sorcerers could be bound, Marduk Azaru, to bind bitter oppression, and that the net of Mamet, the taboo, because of its many knots, was effective in keeping evilly disposed magicians away. the omens of ancient Babylon. Divination as practiced by the means of augury, the interpretation of omens. Before we begin, when Sin, Lord Zu, stole the roll of Bel, it is said that he merged augury with reading the flashes of thunder, meaning the worship is merged with the worship of the divine storm bird and Zu, the lion-faced demon. And this is no different from the work of Nostradamus, and is the reason he was labeled as a witch. Soon I will create a new channel, beginning with the work of Nostradamus, after which my work will continue in Egypt. Divination as practiced by the means of augury, the interpretation of omens, was a rite of the first importance among the Babylonians and Assyrians. This was different from divination by astrology. The favorite method of augury among the old Chaldeans was that by examination of the liver of a slaughtered animal. It was thought that when an animal was offered up in sacrifice to a god, that the deity identified himself for a while with that animal. Meaning, this is where we get the totemic figures and the anthropomorphic creatures, and the origin of the demon being cast into the pig or other animal depending on the offering, and that the beast thus afforded a means of indicating the wishes of the god, but wish and desire are cognate with curse, and these gods were once demons, meaning they still are. I wonder what DEI is an anagram for. Didn't earn it, probably, and it is no different here. Now, among the people in a primitive state of culture, the soul is almost invariably supposed to reside in the liver instead of the heart or brain. More blood is secreted by the liver than by any other organ in the body, and upon the opening of a carcass, it appears the most striking, the most central, and the most sanguinary of the vital parts. Sanguinary meaning bloodthirsty or accompanied by bloodshed. Sanguine. The liver was, in fact, supposed by the early peoples to be the fountain of blood supply, and therefore life itself. Hepatoscopy, or divination from the liver, was undertaken by the Chaldeans for the purpose of determining what the gods had in mind. The soul of the animal became, for the nonce, holic, addiction, anointing, and Christ are all synonymous. And here the Chaldeans worshipped a cat god, the lion, addicted to the cat, one could say, or simply Catholic, who used the same Shipu or Baru rituals. But of course there is no connection, officially. The soul of the animal became, for the addicted person, the soul of the god. Therefore, if the signs of the liver of the sacrificed animal could be read, the mind of the god became clear, and its intentions regarding the future were known. The Anunnaki are also known as sheep, which reminds me more and more of the Spear of Destiny, and possibly a mistranslation leading to the sacrifice of the Son of God. The animal usually sacrificed was a sheep, the liver of which animal is complicated in appearance. The two lower lobes are sharply divided from one another, and are separated from the upper half by a narrow depression, reminding me of the Great Depression for some strange reason, possibly applied to time itself. The lobes are separated by a narrow depression, and the whole surface is covered with markings and fissures, lines and curves, which give it the appearance of a map on which the roads and valleys are outlined. This only applies to the freshly exercised liver, and these markings are never the same in any two livers. The word ash, meaning one, unique, alone, wish, desire, spider, wolf, curse. Certain priests were set apart for the practice of liver reading, and these were exceedingly expert, being able to decipher the hepatoscopic signs with great skill. They first examined the gall bladder, which might be reduced or swollen. They inferred various circumstances from the several ducts, and the sizes and shapes of the lobes and their appendixes. Diseases of the liver, too, particularly common in all countries, were even more frequent among these animals in the marshy portions of the Euphrates Valley. The literature connected with this species of augury is very extensive, and Ashurbanipal's library contained thousands of fragments describing the omens deduced from this practice. These enumerate the chief appearance of the liver, and the shade of the color of the gall, the length of the ducts, and so forth. The lobes were divided into sections, lower, medial, and higher, and the interpretation varied from the phenomena therein observed. The markings on the liver possessed various names, such as palaces, weapons, paths, and feet, which terms remind us somewhat of the bizarre nomenclature of astrology, a system for giving names to things. Later in the process of the art, the various combinations of signs came to be known so well, and there were so many cuneiform texts in existence which afforded instruction in them, that the liver could be quickly read by the baru or reader, a name which was afterward applied to the astrologist as well, and to those who divined through other natural phenomena. One of the earliest instances on record of hepatoscopy is that regarding Naram Sin, who consulted a sheep's liver before declaring war. The great Sargon did likewise, and we find Gudea applying his liver inspectors when attempting to discover a favorable time for laying the foundations of the temple of Ningersu. Throughout the whole history of the Babylonian monarchy, from its early beginnings to its end, we find this system in vogue, in popular use. Whether it was in force in Sumerian times, we have no means of knowing, but there is likelihood that this was the case. And next we look at the ritual of hepatoscopy. Don't forget, Jesus fulfilled all requirements of the Passover sacrifice. The Bible shows he was inspected and shown to be without defect. The Ritual of Hepatoscopy. A complicated ritual grew up around the readings of the omens through the examination of the liver. The Baru, who officiated, must first of all purify himself and wear special apparel for the ceremony. Both prayers and prayers were offered up to Shamash, Hadad, or Ramon, who were known as the Lords of Divination, to whom specific questions were asked. The sheep selected for the sacrifice must be, like the red heifer and the building of the third temple, it must be immaculate, and the manner of merodaching, slaughtering it, and the examination of its liver must be made with the most meticulous care. Sometimes the signs were doubtful, and upon such occasions a second sheep was sacrificed. Nabonidus, the last king of Babylon, father of Belshazzar, who worshipped Sin, Lord Zu, on one occasion desired to restore a temple to the moon god at Haran. He wished to be certain that this step, this action, commended itself to Merodach, death and slaughter, the chief deity of Babylonia. I'd say Merodach was the personification of the gate to the afterlife, Lord Zu being the gatekeeper. So he applied this to the liver inspectors of his day and found that the omen was favorable. The late Lewis Spence is chipping away at the term ash. One unique, alone, wish, desire, wolf, curse, spider. First he mentioned the wishes, then desires, and now we find Nabonidus desirous of making a certain symbol of the sun god in accordance with an ancient pattern. He placed a model of this before Shamash and consulted the liver of a sheep to ascertain whether the god approved of the offering. But on 3 separate occasions, the signs were unfavorable. Nabonidus then concluded that the model of the symbol could not have been correctly reproduced, and on replacing it by another, he found the signs propitious, meaning favorable. Hold on a minute, wouldn't that mean? So in chaos magic, A, it has to be hidden. B, one has to know the process. C, you have to redefine it. Hence the term chaos magic, and is the reason it doesn't work for most people, which would indicate that Nabonidus is using chaos magic in order to acquire a fake good omen. In order, however, that there should be no mistake, he sought among the records of the past for the result of a liver inspection on a similar occasion, and by comparing the omens, that he was safe in making a symbol. Peculiar signs, when they were found, connected with events of importance, were specially noted in the literature of liver divination, and were handed down from generation to generation. The sins of the fathers passes down to their sons. Thus, a number of omens are associated with Gilgamesh, the godson of Lugalbanda, the first ever divinity, who gained divinity from Anzu, the most powerful demon, the divine storm bird. Gilgamesh, the mythical hero of the Babylonian epic of Gilgamesh, Anzu being good as a protector, but also the curse upon the tablet, should anyone attempt to destroy it. A certain condition of the gallbladder is said to indicate the omen of Urumush, whom the men of his palace killed. Bad signs and good signs are enumerated in the literature of this subject. Thus, like most peoples, the Babylonians considered the right side as lucky and the left as unlucky. Any sign on the right side of the gallbladder, ducts, or lobes was supposed to refer to the king, the country, or the army, while a similar sign on the sinister side applied to the enemy, similar to the steel of vultures. It is worth noting that Anzu means vulture or eagle, meaning Anzu has a favorable and a sinister side. Thus, a good sign on the right side applied to Babylonia or Assyria in a favorable sense. A bad sign on the right side is an unfavorable sense, and a good sign on the left side was an omen favorable to the enemy. Don't forget, Zu also means mirror, and each side and the sign is reflected, inverted. Whereas a bad sign on the left side to the native king or forces. It would be out of place here to give a more extended description of the liver reading of the ancient Chaldeans. Suffice it to say that the subject is a very complicated one in its deeper significance, i.e. the will of the gods, once demons, and has little interest to the general reader in its advanced stages. Certain well-marked conditions of the liver could only indicate certain political, religious, or personal events. It will be more interesting if we attempt to visualize the act of divination by liver reading, as it was practiced in ancient Babylonia, and if our imaginations break down in the process. It is not the fault of the very large material we have to work upon. Next, we have the account of the Missing Caravan, before I begin my work on the monsters of ancient Babylon. the Anunnaki Omen, and the Missing Caravan. The ages roll back as a scroll, and I see myself as one of the great banker merchants of Babylon, one of those princes of commerce whose contracts and agreements are found stamped upon clay cylinders, where once the stately palaces of barter arose from the swarming streets of the city of Merodach, death and slaughter. I have that morning been carried in my litter by sweating slaves from my white house in a leafy suburb, lying beneath the shadow of the lofty temple city of Borsippa. As I reach my place of business, I am aware of unrest, for the financial operations in which I engage are so closely watched that I may say, without self-praise, that I represent the pulse of Babylonian commerce. I enter the cool chamber, where I usually transact my business, and where a pair of officious Persian slaves commence to fan me as soon as I take my seat. My head clerk enters and makes obeisance, with an expression on his face eloquent of important news. It is, as I expected, as I feared. The caravan from the Persian Gulf, due to arrive at Babylon more than a week ago, has not yet made its appearance, and although I had sent scouting parties as far as Ninur, these have returned without bringing me the least intelligence regarding it. I feel convinced that the caravan with my spices, woven fabrics, rare woods, and precious stones will never come tinkling down the great central street to deposit its wealth at the doors of my warehouse, and the thought renders me so irritable that I sharply dismiss the Persian fan-bearers and curse again and again the black-browed sons of Elam, who have doubtless looted my goods and have cut the throats of my guards and servants. I go home at an early hour, filled with my misfortune. I cannot eat my evening meal. My wife gently asks me what ails me, but I growl. I refuse to enlighten her upon the cause of my annoyance. Still, however, she persists and succeeds in breaking down my surly opposition. Why trouble thy heart concerning this thing, when thou mayest know what has happened to your goods and your servants? Go tomorrow to the Baru, and he will enlighten thee. She says, I start. After all, women have sense. There can be no harm in seeing the Baru and asking him to divine what has happened to my caravan. But I bethink me that I am very wealthy, and that the priests love to pluck a well-feathered pigeon. I mention my suspicions of the priestly caste in no measured terms, to the distress of my devout wife and the amusement of my soldier son. Restlessly I toss upon my couch, and after a sleepless night, I feel that I cannot resume my business, with the fear of loss upon me. So without breathing a word of my intention to my wife, I direct my litter slaves to carry me to the great temple at Borsippa. When I arrived, I inquire for the chief Baru. He is one of the friends of my youth, but for years our paths have diverged, and it is with surprise that he now greets me. I acquaint him with the nature of my dilemma, and nodding sympathetically, he assures me he will do his utmost to assist me. Somewhat reassured, I follow him into a tiled court, near the far end of which stands a great altar. At a sign from him, 2 priests bring in a live sheep and proceed to cut its throat. They then open the carcass and extract the liver. Immediately, the chief Baru bends his grey head over it. For a long time, he stares at it with the keenest attention, and my old doubts concerning the sacerdotal caste return. At last, the grey head rises from the long inspection, and the Baru turns to me with a smiling face, and says, "The omen is good, my son," with a cheerful intonation. "The compass and the hepatic duct are short. Thy path will be protected by the guardian spirit, as will the path of thy servants. Go, and fear not." He speaks so definitely, and his words are so reassuring, that I seize him by the hands, and thanking him effusively, I take my leave. I go down to my warehouse in a new spirit of hopefulness, and disregard the disdainful or pitying looks cast in my direction. I sit unperturbed, and dictate contracts and letters of credit to my scribe. Ha! What is that? By Merodach, the death and slaughter of the innocent animal. It is the sound of bells. Up I leap, upsetting the wretched scribe, who is seated at my feet, and trampling upon his wet clay tablets, I rush to the door. Down the street slowly advances a travel-worn caravan. At the head of it, there rides my trusty brown-faced captain, Babar. He tumbles out of the saddle and kneels before me, but I raise him in a close embrace. All my goods, he assures me, are intact, and the cause of delay was a severe sickness, which broke out among his followers, but all have recovered, and my credit is restored. As I turn to re-enter my warehouse with Babar, a detaining hand is placed on my shoulder. It is a messenger from the chief Baru. "My brother at the temple saw thy caravan coming from afar," he says politely. Remember, the chief Baru was his old friend, and there are no friends in business. And his message to thee, my son, is that, since you have happily recovered thine own, the missing caravan, thou shouldest devote a teeth of it to the service of the gods. A teeth was given to Malak Memetim, aka the Anunnaki.